The wonderful, half-finished Victorian mansion, hiding in its own steep-sided Cotswold valley, at the end of a mile of rough, steep driveway and hemmed in by thick woodland, is almost a cliché when it comes to ghost stories. You just have to look at it to shiver slightly and walk by with averted gaze. Until, that is, you realise that what you see was built a mere 150 years ago, was never even completed, let alone occupied, and which surely rules out any spirits left over from turbulent human existence. Well, no, not actually. Woodchester Mansion is an extremely haunted building, which has attracted the attention of ghost hunters for decades. The house, as you may well know if you've seen our documentary about it, published only a few weeks ago, is run by the Woodchester Mansion Trust, an organisation charged with the task of maintaining the extraordinary structure and masterminding the large body of volunteers who staff the place when it's open to the public. So often were the Trust asked about the ghosts in the house that they appointed their very own in-house ghost expert, Chris Howley, to monitor the apparitions and to explore every nook and eerie cranny of this place to find all vestiges of spookdom. This film is based around the comprehensive document he wrote describing the ghosts of Woodchester Mansion, a copy of which is available in the house when you visit. When he writes his accounts of the various ghostly sightings, he shows a healthy scepticism at all times, knowing only too well how ghost hunting groups, especially those working for television companies, have a vested interest in making the whole experience as exciting as possible, even, dare I say it, to the extent of fabricating events. In this place, I'm not sure that's necessary. In 2001, an American TV company making a series called The Scariest Places on Earth took over Woodchester for a whole month. During one all-night vigil, they had the company of some members of the Ghost Club of Great Britain, who described what happened as follows. It was just after 2:30 a.m. that we all heard a quiet, metallic knocking coming from the right side of the fireplace. Everyone looked in that direction, obviously very surprised indeed. Just as an aside, why is it, by the way, that ghost hunters always seem surprised and sometimes even frightened when the very thing they must surely expect to happen actually happens? Anyway, over a couple of minutes, the sound gradually became louder, and reaching a crescendo, it was now deafening. As we looked at the wall, letters appeared as if painted by an invisible source. The letters were of the same light mustard colour as the wall, only darker, and spelled out the initials SWSB in capitals and about 12 inches in height, and roughly formed. Now, the Ghost Club guests were pretty sceptical about this, particularly the lettering, suspecting an elaborate hoax by the television company. But Robert Snow of the club wrote after the event, "I carefully examined the areas in question and could find no explanation for the sounds." The noise, by the way, was so loud some present suggested the whole building shook. He continued, "The painted letters, however, are another matter and could have been a hoax." Early the following year, the caretaker at the time was woken at 2:30 in the morning by his dog. He left his flat to discover all the lights in the house were blazing. He ran round, not followed by his dog, who insisted on staying in the flat, looking for intruders. He found none, and indeed discovered that all the access points in this massive building were securely locked. No explanation was ever discovered. Very shortly afterwards, on the 26th of January 2002, the Ghost Club returned in a convoy of cars, and as they approached the house, they saw, in the window above the front door, the clear silhouette of a young woman in a cream linen dress with a low scooped neckline. She had short, blonde, collar-length hair brushed back from her face. She was as clear as day and seen by all. But there's one small problem. That window, as you can see from the inside, is many meters above the ground level and hasn't and never has had a floor in front of it. Our first journey around this wonderful place started at the back of the house, and quickly we were introduced to the chapel. William Lee, the Catholic convert who started building this house in the mid-19th century, intended it to be the centre of a substantial Roman Catholic community, so the chapel was a vital part of the plan. It's probable that he intended it to be even bigger than it is, which goes some way to explain why the proportions are a little disconcerting. The rose window is really much too large for the size of the room. But I'm not sure that goes all the way to explain why there is a feeling of oppression and gloom, particularly if you're on your own as you walk into this space, intended as a place of worship. Again in 2002, clearly a year of extreme ghostly activity, a small man was seen standing in the doorway between the sacristy and the chapel itself, gazing up at the stained glass windows. He is reported to have been looking sad, perhaps at the failure of William Lee to complete his dream. Now, of course, with all these unexplained sightings, the ghostly atmosphere was building. A trust volunteer in March the same year was walking through the chapel when something very like a sinister, ghostly laugh rang in her ears from immediately behind her. She was completely alone in the building, and there is no doubt she was genuinely disturbed by the experience. Walking into the Great North Range corridor is an extraordinary experience, whatever the circumstances. This passage is, however, one of the most regular ghostly sights in the house. Many times the same tall man has been seen, usually described as slightly sinister, possibly even angry. When we get to the kitchen, we will discover that this fellow doesn't restrict his hauntings to this corridor. He appears to have an agenda, and he seems to be searching for someone. It is in this corridor that some poltergeist activity has been experienced, or so the story goes. Stones have been seen to fly around, chucked with considerable force. Even our slightly sceptical resident ghost expert Chris Howley has experienced this. He is entirely convinced that an unseen ghostly hand threw a substantial rock in front of him from the chapel into the north corridor. Now the house is full of jackdaws, and my money's on them. They remain my absolute favourite birds, mischievous to a fault. And so, off to the right down the internal north-south corridor, past the entrance to the cellar, of which more later, towards the kitchen. Here, I would like to quote directly from Chris Howley's leaflet. I'm sure you'll forgive me. You walk through the scullery into the kitchen. This is where the clock, never wound up and without any apparent means of movement, was seen to change its time display, and the bell in the tower, secure behind locked metal screens, was heard to ring. On more than one occasion, the spirit of a young man in his early 20s has been seen in this part of the building. He is silent and crouches looking into the scullery as if hiding from someone. The tall man from the North Range corridor has also been seen leaning into the kitchen from the scullery doorway. Is this the man from whom the young man could be hiding? Another rather angry apparition has been spotted in the passageway behind the kitchen. A short man with some kind of disfigurement surprises people regularly. And so we return to the south range of the house and enter the drawing room. This is the only room in the house even remotely finished, and the reasons for its completion are related in our documentary, so I won't go back over it now. Suffice to say that now we come to the ghostly events actually experienced by our resident ghost expert, and so to a very personal and convincing bunch of stories. Sitting in the drawing room with his team in 2006, awaiting the arrival of a group of paranormal investigators, Chris and all those around him heard the door open, and they all stood up to greet the visitors. No one appeared. Aware that skeptics would put this down to a draft blowing open the door, from that moment onwards they ensured the door was securely fastened on all occasions they were hosting visitors. In the following month, a similar experience occurred. Footsteps and voices were heard approaching down the corridor towards the door handle turned, the door swung open, and no one was there. In 2009, at the end of a fruitless nighttime search for ghostly experiences, a group called Haunted Happenings were commiserating with each other for their lack of sightings when footsteps were heard striding down the corridor towards the library next door. Rushing into the library and also into the north corridor to identify the intruder, there was absolutely nobody there. Haunted Happenings were extremely pleased. In October 2013, Chris was in the house doing a photo shoot in full Halloween costume when he heard footsteps in the library and a cough. They were alone in the building, but this wasn't the last audible experience of the night. They also heard someone running along the passage by the chapel. A couple of months later, Chris was alone in the drawing room when he was confronted by a small boy with rosy cheeks, wearing a blue-grey suit with a matching cap. He stared at Chris and then faded away. It was outside the drawing room door, looking down the corridor toward the house entrance, that Chris and his friend and colleague from Gloucester, Lynn, watched as a ghostly lady in a long white dress appeared through a solid wall on the left of the corridor and drifted gently across the passage and through the opposite wall. They were both astonished. It was becoming clear to Chris that the new building wasn't really the home of these ghosts. The Georgian house, on whose foundations this house sits, must surely be the real home of all these spirits. Their movements would seem to bear no relation to the walls and passages that exist today. The great main staircase just opposite the drawing room is the playground for an energetic phantom in the form of a young girl who runs and dances up and down the steps. She's been seen on many occasions by several different people. Perhaps the strangest thing about the hauntings in this house is that the cast appears to be so big. Many different ghosts have been seen by several different people in the passage from the staircase towards the famous bathroom. Children, floaty ladies, and a distinguished gentleman dressed in a grand red outfit and accompanied by a dog have all been seen at different times in this passage. The bathroom itself seems to be best known for a smell of bacon, sometimes assumed to be left over from the American soldiers billeted here in the Second World War. I did just wonder if the caretaker had a penchant for bacon, but I have a hunch they might be vegetarians. And so up the stairs built by the Trust, channeling the style of the scaffolding that would have been used in the mid-19th century, to the first floor corridor, where the ghost of the lady spotted through the window by the arriving ghost hunters can be seen running, apparently in some distress. The sound of playing children has also been heard, coming suddenly to a stop, suggesting to many that perhaps they took a wrong turn and fell to their death through one of the hanging doors to the floor below. Up again, the final stone spiral staircase to the second floor corridor. This wonderful architectural gem with its line of supporting arches is one of my favourite bits of the house, but I haven't experienced what so many appear to have experienced in the past, a kind of possession. One lady broke down in floods of tears, crying, "Please look after my baby." And our very own hero, Chris Howley, describes being taken over by an angry spirit, whereupon he turned on his friends, yelling at them to get out. It was only when they yelled back that he shook off the malignant influence of this spirit intruder and returned to the normal polite man that he is. He describes this event as having entirely changed his whole perception of the paranormal. Just like Chris has done in his leaflet for the Trust, I have left the cellar of Woodchester Mansion until last. As I said in the documentary we published a couple of weeks ago on the Cotswold Explorer, I am a retired wine merchant, and cellars have played an important role in my life. I think I'm going to leave the stories of terror and poltergeist in the cellars to another time. I prefer to remember them as a stunning example of custom-built cold storage for wine, and imagine, probably optimistically, the Lee family planning to build themselves a wonderful wine collection if ever they had had the opportunity to live in this most haunted house. Oh, and just one more thing. Max and Cassandra kindly gave us a cup of tea in their flat after we'd filmed the documentary. We explained we were more interested in the building than the hauntings, as I, in particular, didn't believe in ghosts. They gave us the impression, all the while we were enjoying their hospitality, that they were sympathetic to my views, but just as we were leaving, they dropped casually into the conversation that two ghosts were almost daily characters in their lives, so familiar that they hardly flinched when they met them, indeed spoke to them as familiar friends. History doesn't relate as to whether they answer back. Oh well, who'd have thunk it? If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget you can sign up to Cotswold Explorer membership for a completely ad-free experience, as well as exclusive content, early access and regular ghost stories, all hosted on Patreon. Just check out the link in the description.